Hey, everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the CEO and Chief Creator of Amazing Ideas at StunningDigitalMarketing.com. Today, before I jump into an intro for this week's episode, I want to make a special announcement. Due to the last couple of weeks not getting podcasts out on a regular basis, and unfortunately my ongoing internet issues, which I've talked about in the newsletter, I've basically gone through 6 major internet outages in a week. I'm going to do something a little special this week. I'm going to release a podcast every day of the week. Just for this week only, just a little bit to say thank you for listening, thanks for your patience, thanks for your dedication, and thanks for everything else. Now this week I have with me my good friend Bev Alldridge. And what Bev and I talk about is something really important to me, and that's mental health and how you deal with how you're feeling and mindset and the whole mental health issues. So do me a favor, pull up a chair, grab your favorite drink, water, Coke, coffee, tea, sit back and relax and enjoy this great conversation that Bev and I had. And thanks as always for listening. Morning, everybody. Rob Cairns here. I'm here with my friend Bevs Routines. How are you today, Bev?
I'm great, thank you.
And what we're going to talk about a whole multitude of things, but I wanted Bev to take some time and introduce herself a little bit about her and her background, please.
All right, thanks, Rob. Well, I worked for the federal government of Canada for over 30 years. After finishing a degree in communications. And that was a really interesting job, so many different kinds of work, including being a manager with over 40 employees and over $1 million budget with very stressful. Pretty much all my jobs had that continuity of stress and high pressure, political factors involved. And I ended my career in Syria, Damascus, running our refugee program in the office there and the embassy. But alongside my federal government work, I sort of had my creative side going because I was writing, I was involved in making some films. And then last 15 years or so, I've been painting. And on top of my painting, I've been writing about wellness.
And that's really interesting. Anybody who hasn't seen Bev's paintings, they're really great. She shares them quite frequently, and I would say she does some great work. What about wellness? And that kind of leads me into my next question. You created a blog to talk about wellness, and how did that all come about?
Well, I think the need to share comes from basically just a career in service that combines with the fact that I'm the sort of person that if I go to a restaurant that I think is great, I want to tell somebody about it, or a book I've just read. So that urge to share something that I've discovered that I find very helpful or interesting. And mindfulness came my way a number of years ago. At a really opportune time, and it helped me come to terms with a lot of things I was finding stressful. And I got so interested in it, I actually became certified to be a mindfulness teacher. So I found writing my blog, which I decided to call Less Stress, More Calm, because who doesn't want that? I just want to share sort of helpful, practical tips. You don't need to be a mindfulness devotee. You don't need to be any kind of spiritual person. Just practical tips, virtually all of which are based on science and neuroplasticity that changes how our brains are wired and sort of builds our resilience and sense of well-being.
Yeah, and I think that's the key is the practical part of it. If people don't understand that you don't have to be a doctor or you don't have to be somebody higher up to take care of your brain, correct?
Quite so. One of my favorite people is by the name of Rick Hansen, and he talks a lot about rewiring the brain and how it's the small things we do frequently that take very little time, but it's the routine of them that rewires the brain and actually physically changes our baseline of resilience.
It's so true. One guy, and I think we've talked offline about this, that I'm a big fan of, and I've been at his workshops in Toronto, in the States, is Tony Robbins, and most people know who Tony is. And one of the things he talks about, it's interesting with mindfulness, is we all are cultured to be negative by trade, and you have to repattern or rewire your brain to be more positive. And he said, as human beings, we're actually just negative by nature. And so I think rewiring, repatterning is actually a big deal. What do you think about that?
Oh, I quite agree. I mean, they often talk about just evolution. We had to be constantly scanning our environment to see is something good or something bad. And safety was uppermost in mind. So our starting point was, this is bad unless I can prove that it's good, because otherwise I could be dead. Now, we've evolved so many years since then, but that wiring still is there, that unless I see it otherwise and I'm convinced otherwise, my starting point is, this is bad.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And as we're talking, you know, it's funny, we all go to the doctor. Oh, my arm hurts, I've got a cold. I was saying before I got on this call, I've been sick the last couple days. I took care of that. But most people don't take care of their mental health. And I think part of it's stigma to some degree, but I also think sometimes mental health is even more important than physical health. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have to agree completely with you on that one. In fact, much of my career has been dealing with refugees. And in the 2 years that I was in Damascus processing refugees, that really left a lasting impact, which I finally acknowledged as PTSD, and I've gone through some counseling for that, which has been tremendously helpful. But I mean, who thinks, you know, this older woman, see, I didn't even say senior, this older woman, you know, your basic suburban looking housewife, she's got PSD. I mean, how does that happen? Well, you know what? It happens.
Yeah.
It can happen in any number of circumstances in varying degrees, but you can't keep ignoring it. That's what I've discovered, is that you've got to face it and work through it.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, there was a case last week in Toronto where a Toronto police officer who suffered from PTSD actually committed suicide in the garage at the bottom of police headquarters. And there's no question, they've attributed that back to PTSD. We've seen it in cases of military personnel who have been overseas quite a bit, suffer from it. We've seen it with other people. And I think, and even not PTSD, I mean, even you need to take care of your health and feel better about yourself, because if you don't feel better about yourself, nobody's going to feel better about you either. Like, that's the other problem, right? You have to take care of yourself, don't you think? Like,
oh, I do agree. And I think intellectually that most of us believe that we are quite competent and able to deal with these things that come our way. We have faith in our abilities, and we think, okay, I can get over this. I can power through this.
Yeah.
And it's not always something we can power through on our own, and that it's helpful to have someone with a little more experience in the area being able to reflect a few things back to you, that's looking at things a different way. And
sometimes it's just getting somebody to listen that's non-judgmental, where you can bounce something off, because the problem is all in our personal circles, in our family, our friends, they all have an interest, so their judgment's already clouded a little bit, if you get what I'm saying. Like, they don't. So we all have tough mental health days, me included, and I'm sure you do. How do you deal with this?
Well, I think the first thing I do is I try and keep things in perspective. I remind myself that Mother may have never said there would be days like this, but there sure are days like this, that chaos is normal.
Yep.
So not to resist it, to just say, okay, we're here now. We're in a period of chaos, and just like anything, the chaos is going to end, and I'll be back sort of at an even keel.
Mm-hmm.
But right now I'm in the chaos. I recognize that it's just part of the cycle, and I don't resist it. I think that's the big thing too, is not to resist, just acknowledge that it's there.
Yep.
And I also I'm a big fan of Kelly McGonigal in her book, The Upside of Stress, where she talks about how many studies have shown how our relationship with stress affects our health. And if we think stress is bad for us, and we truly believe that, then in fact, our body triggers hormones that are harmful to us. Whereas if we have an understanding with our relationship with stress, is it's actually enabling us, it's pumping adrenaline to get us suited up, if you will, for the battle at hand. The body triggers hormones that are positive and helping us think more clearly and act more forthrightly. Mm-hmm. So I'm feeling stressful on a bad day. I also remember that, and I'm thinking, okay, what is this physical feeling going on right now? Am I giving it a bad name? It's actually my body trying to help me out. That's saying, okay, you've got something you got to face right now. I'm going to shoot you some more blood to your brain and get you better able to think. In fact, there was a great study that she quotes in that book about football players, college football players. They get pumped up for a game. They're psyched, they're all hyping around before the game. Mm-hmm. But exam, they're completely down and they're feeling stressed, and they're worrying about going into the exam. But it's just their mental attitude. It's the same thing about getting pumped up before an exam, the way you get pumped up before a game. It's just how you approach it.
Yeah, I would agree. Go ahead.
In mind.
Yeah.
I keep that in mind in terms of thinking about, I don't automatically label the physical sensation I'm going through on a bad day as a bad thing. I'm thinking, okay, is my body trying to help me right now? And if it is, thank you very much.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. Sometimes you have to take those bad days as they come, and there's not much you can do about them sometimes. And sometimes it's a bad day at work, someday it's a bad day at home, someday it's your partner's having a bad day in life and you want to be there. It can be a multitude of things. I actually find, it's interesting. I find having animals around, we were talking, before we started doing this interview, and I was saying, I've got 3 dogs, and believe it or not, a cat. And they actually help on bad days. They really do. And
I can believe that.
And taking a step back on bad days and saying, I'm not perfect. I'm good at what I do, and I need a break. And say, okay, today's the day for that break, and just kind of accepting it. That's, to me, one of the biggest deals, is accepting how you feel and why you feel. And then you can decide what to do about it. So.
Right. And that's the component that leads right into, for me, what is a sort of core part of my well-being, I guess, would be being familiar with a practice they call RAIN. I don't know if you're familiar with it. The RAIN meditation, It's a RAIN stands for recognize, acknowledge, investigate, and nurture. And it's a process you work through when you're going through tough emotions, tough day, that you just go through these steps. And when you do it systematically, it brings you back to a better place. And the more you do it, the sort of better the muscles develop with it. But it can be it can be your best friend on a bad day.
No, I agree. Now, we talk about mental health and managing it. Do you find, Bev, that routine works well for you? And what type of activities do you do to sort of help that?
For about, maybe 20 years now, ever since I read The Artist's Way, I started doing morning pages. Okay. And instruction is basically when you wake up, before you look at your phone, or just as soon as you get your first cup of coffee and before you're sort of tune out of the fog, you just sit down and you write 3 pages without stopping. And if you can't think what to write, you just write, I can't think what to write, or blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
But fill 3 pages without any judgment about it. And it is a very revealing exercise. And it's also a very creative exercise. I have found so many solutions to things I didn't even know I was looking for an answer for that have come out of those pages. That's a core part of my morning routine. And I try to meditate during the day for maybe 10 minutes, sometimes up to 30. And I never thought I would be a meditator, to be honest with you. It's just over time I've discovered how helpful it can be. So I now practice that.
I'm not actually.
And yeah, well, when I was tried meditating with the idea that you're supposed to clear your brain, I thought, oh, I can't do this. And I couldn't. But when I learned the sort of mindfulness meditation, which is not about trying to clear your brain, but rather just watch your thoughts come and go and don't engage with them, that I've found very helpful. It sort of just like allows all the thoughts that have been crowding your brain to have just a moment's presence and then leave. And you just feel relieved afterwards. And then the last thing I do, I guess, in terms of routine, it would be gratitude practice.
Yep.
But from the perspective of neuroplasticity, that whole rewiring of the brain, because it's not enough to just sit down and write out 3 things you're grateful for and then move on, which I know is sometimes recommended, but you're better off just to think of one thing you're grateful for. It could be just picture your pet. You're grateful for your pet. And those warm, fuzzy feelings that you start to feel, just sit and revel in them. Don't look at your phone. Don't get up. Don't end it. Just let it last as long as it lasts. And if you can do that a couple of times a day, day in, day out, that's when you're rewiring your brain.
Oh, no question. I think for me, one of the things I do every day is I start the day with a 5K walk. Rain, shine, cold, not cold. My wife, Jill, will call me insane some days because I don't care what the weather is. And I honestly do that as much for the physical as the mental. It clears my head. It gets me in a space I need to be. I find routine-wise, the other thing I've done for years is every night before I go to bed, I write a journal. And I don't type it, I actually write it. I have volumes of journals going back about 5 or 6, probably 7, 8 years right now. And that's the same idea as you writing in the morning. For me, writing at night works, and it kind of lets me go through the day and say, okay, did this make sense? Did this not make sense? And some days it's stupid little stuff, and some days it's really in-depth stuff. There's no right answer and no wrong answer. And then the other thing I always find helps in routines is, and to me it's a big part of it, is telling my wife like how much I care every day and how much she matters to me. And I think that is something many of us forget about, is our personal lives. We go through life, and I was listening to a podcast last night exactly about this, and they said, your relationship becomes like a business sometimes. You go through and you do what you got to do. You go to work, you make money, you come home, you pay the bills, you eat dinner, and it's all routine. And the problem with that is you're not investing time in what matters. You're just kind of going through motions sometimes. And I think you got to be really careful to do that as well. So,
no, that's beautiful. Yeah. You're right.
So as we're talking about this, do you have any good books you recommend that people can pick up and read to sort of help them along with the process, or help them learn a little bit more about what matters?
Well, I think were I to pick just one, I would say it's called Just One Thing by Rick Hansen. Yeah. And you can open it anywhere. It's every page is one separate activity, and it's not sequential, but they're all aimed at some little habit or piece of information that's going to help your well-being. So that's a great one. It's a good bedside book. And you never feel compelled to try and get through more pages, because just learning that one little thing is a big deal. Yep. Also, The Upside of Stress, changing your relationship to stress. And what's interesting too on that is the studies show that even if you open your mind to the possibility that stress can have some positive benefits, you're already starting to change the health benefits. Cool.
And you're going to put some links to those on your website, you had mentioned?
Yeah, I'll put them up there. Yes, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And something for people in business that I think might be helpful is mindfulness for creativity. I don't know if you've read that. Dr.
No, I
Danny
haven't. I've heard of that one. I've not read that one at this point.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, having been in business like for so many years myself in terms of the sort of corporate world, we're just sometimes just so trying to power through to get to a solution, applying all the logic we can to find the answer, when that indeed is making matters worse when we find ourselves in a situation that really requires a creative solution. And for a creative solution, you need to have a different approach than just knuckle down and get it done. And this book takes you through that process. So I found that very, very interesting as well.
Yeah, it sounds like I need to add that one to my bedside reading list. Though, with the other, I'm an avid reader, so the big joke is if I've ordered something from Amazon, did I order stuff for the house or did I order books? And if I've ordered books, how many books do I have on my bedside table to read right now? So that's yeah, sounds like I need to read that one. So let's kind of move on. Do you have any recommended apps online that, besides your website, that people can use to help them with this shit?
I'm not using any at the moment. I was listening to Calm, the website Calm, for the longest time, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's a well-known one that a lot of people talk about. Yeah.
And I know people enjoy Headspace and Insight. Not currently using them at the moment, but those are ones I understand people quite enjoy.
Okay. If you have a really tough day, is there anything you go to almost right away?
That technique of rain that I talked about. And you can, Tara Brach, B-R-A-C-H. She's well known for it, I would say, although this has been a practice that's been around since the 70s, I believe. But she explains it really well in a meditation explanation on YouTube. So if you Google R-A-I-N or Tara Brach, I think you'll find it. That is just so helpful. I can't stress enough what a difference it makes in terms of learning to be with difficult emotions.
Yeah.
So that's certainly my big go-to.
No, and I find like when I have tough days, and I haven't had a really bad one lately, I'll go to something I like listening to, usually quiet music, usually music that means something to me, that makes me think. I find on tough days, I like to think that, because I'll think my way out of it, or think about what matters, and that kind of, helps me quite a bit.
I think related to that is you don't resist it. You don't try and ignore it or think it'll go away. You have to in some way engage with it, and you're finding that way through music is helping you do that. And for me, it's the rain process, but certainly my big takeaway is that don't ignore it. Don't pretend it's not there.
I would agree with you on that one. Let's talk about, we've talked about some books, we've talked about some apps. Is there any other good resources or organizations or anything you would suggest for people?
Not off the top of my head in terms of organizations. I do like the mindful.org online. Their articles are really good.
Okay. That's a bit of a help. Is there anything else you would like to mention that we haven't really talked about today?
Other than reinforcing a point about resistance not being a good idea.
Yeah, I agree with that. Acceptance is the better idea.
And even, start looking through this rain process, acknowledging it's there, and acknowledging it's there doesn't mean that you're okay with it, but it's just saying, all right, you're here. Let's talk.
Yeah, that's true. How can people see your work, get in touch with you, and reach out if they want to?
Well, if they want to check out my website, it's lessstressmorecalm.com.
Yep.
And my, if they forget that, my name, Bev Alldridge, I've got my art website under that name, so they could get a link onwards from if they find it.
Okay. Thanks, Bev, for joining me. Really enjoyed the discussion. I hope it gives people some food for thought on how to deal with the brain and how to deal with it, how they feel. And thanks for the great tips. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Rob. It's been a pleasure. And I do hope people take away that they have a lot more control than they may realize.
Yeah. Thank you, Bev. Have a great
Thank
day,
you.
everybody. Thanks for joining Bev and I for this week's podcast. As always, this podcast is a production of Stunning Digital Marketing. Please jump on over to our website at StunningDigitalMarketing.com, and while you're there, subscribe to our newsletter. Scroll down the bottom of the main page and you'll see it right in front of you. For tips, tricks, and help to make your business succeed in the digital world directly to your inbox. I can be reached on Twitter at Rob Cairns, spelled Cairns, or any other social media platform. On our website, there's multiple links to those platforms, so please reach out. Something new, if you want to get in touch with us, go to our website and you can Facebook message us for help, advice, or even questions about the services we offer. So check that cool feature out. As always, this podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I love you and I miss you every day. Keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and make your business succeed.